The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, greetings. Welcome to another presentation in this public service nation-building series, The Law and You. This is program number 929, coming to you on Monday, the 11th of March, 2019. On this program, I will speak to you on the topic sentencing guidelines. But before I get into the topic, rather a number of preliminary comments. Bear with me. Firstly, and as usual, I would like to send out my condolences to all families which have suffered recent bereavements. And I send special condolences to the family of the late Miss Viola John, and in particular to her only child, Miss Lafleur John, whom I taught in the grammar school, and Lafleur's only child, her daughter, Mrs. Kizzy John Baines. Miss Viola John was a nation builder of class. Thankfully, the Lord has allowed her to live to a ripe old age, but in her time she has given stalwart service as a public officer and as the live wire in many organizations. I knew her personally when in 1968 I joined GECO, as it then was, and became chairman of the credit committee. Miss John had been a founding member of GECO and served in several offices of GECO. She was active in her church and in several organizations. I'm sure in the course of the next few days, you will hear many tributes paid to her, and I'm sure in the weekend newspapers, you will be able to read tributes to Miss Viola John. She was a committed nation builder. People of her generation are the ones responsible for St. Vincent and the Grenadines having developed as vibrantly as it has. I'm sure Lafleur and Kizzy will miss her greatly, but they will be fortified in the knowledge that this was a lady who has made a sterling contribution to the building of her nation. May she rest in peace. I was fortunate enough today to be able to look at the parliamentary session, which started this morning. I missed a little bit of it because I was in court, but as soon as I got out of court, I went and switched on my television in my office, and there was the Prime Minister winding up his obituary remarks, and it's because of what he said I realized that Miss John had died. I heard him pay a brief tribute to her. But this session of Parliament fascinated me because something was extremely refreshing about today's sitting of Parliament. And I was able to look at the proceedings from shortly after 10 until about 2:30 when I had to leave to come up to tape this program. I wish to commend all members of Parliament on their behavior at the meeting today, at least up to when I had to stop listening. There are times when one is embarrassed at what goes on in Parliament. When the members of Parliament conduct themselves in such a way that you are ashamed. But today was an exception. True, you had the usual, a bit of a heckling and here and there, but everything was done in a very good-natured, cooperative manner. There was no shouting, no arguing with the speaker, and generally no argumentation between the members of Parliament themselves. Questions predominated the segment to which I was able to listen. There were 21 questions on the order paper, and all were dealt with in very fulsome manner. And I want to commend the government on the way they answer questions. They normally give out a lot of information. So I thoroughly enjoyed what I saw today in Parliament, and I hope that that is the method by which parliamentarians ought to conduct themselves. And that is the behavior we expect to see of our national leaders. Congratulations to the Honorable Speaker and the members on both sides for a refreshing meeting this morning. I learned quite a lot. The Prime Minister made an extremely lengthy statement on Liat, and I was fascinated by the details that he provided. And when over the weekend one heard of the troubles of Liat, well, we're always hearing about the troubles of Liat, don't we? But over the weekend after the last meeting, there were reports that Liat would go on in a matter of days and the money is going to run out and so on. It was good to hear the facts from the Prime Minister. And I thought, well, Liat is a classic example of the failure by Caribbean leaders to cooperate in the interests of the entire Caribbean. Because here is an airline which is vital to places like St. Vincent and the Grenadines, certainly, as a regional carrier, but only 4 governments to support it, namely Barbados, Antigua, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Dominica. And I thought when I heard these reports, why don't the shareholder governments of Liat, since the other Caribbean islands are not willing to put their money into Liat, why don't they devise some means to force those other governments to pay a fairer share of the burden? And I was happy to hear the Prime Minister announce that a particular measure had been devised whereby those governments which are not shareholders but to which Liat flies would make a more meaningful contribution. But make no mistake, if Liat ever breaks up or goes into bankruptcy, we in St. Vincent and the Grenadines will suffer enormously. Enormously. But let me commend the Liat authorities on its safety record, because in all the troubles Liat has had, it has been flying people in safety. The few incidents in the past involve smaller aircraft, albeit one belonging to the Liat fleet at the time. But Liat has put a high premium on safety. And I used to tell people, when I'm delayed at an airport and people are quarreling and carrying on, I used to say, look, it's better we wait and bear the inconvenience of the late arrival of a flight to which we intend to be connected, because we know that among issues, I happen to know that the Liat maintenance crew take maintenance extremely seriously. And I was told years ago that the most junior mechanic in the Liat maintenance workshop can keep an aircraft on the ground if he is not satisfied that all is well. If he detects anything wrong, he can practically order that plane not to be put in service until it is rectified. So thank you, Liat, for your excellent safety record. But I do hope the financial troubles of Liat would be taken care of. One of the comments made during the sitting this morning by the Prime Minister was in response to those who feel that we should have a system of national honors. Prime Minister said he's in full agreement. He said his gut was wrenched when the people rejected the proposed constitution, which would have set up a republican form of government away from the monarchical form of government we have. But he pointed out that that is what the people voted for. And if we voted to keep the Queen, then we have to keep the Queen's honors. And that is logical. So we are a constitutional monarchy. We are under Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. She is Queen of St. Vincent and Grenadines. And her honors ought to be maintained. You can't, while you're under the Queen, put aside the Queen's honors and have a system of local honors. That would not make sense. And I intend, if the Lord permits, towards the latter part of this year, when we are nearing the 10th anniversary of the failed referendum, I intend to do a program showing the areas of the Constitution which were proposed to be changed and which have remained the same, and the consequences of that. Because whenever I hear some politicians lament about this or that, and I realize that under the Constitution we had proposed this or that would have been corrected, I just smiled and said, well, the Constitution which was proposed was not accepted, and therefore we have to live with the consequences. Told you we'd have a number of preliminary comments. The next one I wish to speak about briefly is about bullying in schools. And if you were asked me to say something against bullying, bullying is where students in school harass and molest other students, sometimes fight them for no good reason. Now, not recent, but fairly modern trends in countries indicate that the civilized world is losing the will to discipline young people. We hear of one Caribbean country that has moved to abolish corporal punishment in all schools. All right, well, they know best. But the teachers in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, most of them, are struggling to maintain discipline in the classroom. So many teachers are spending so much time trying to keep order in the classroom that the time for the actual imparting of knowledge is compromised, because the teachers have very few means of effectively disciplining children. And when the children are especially out of hand, wise teachers simply leave them alone. Parents, on the other hand, are becoming less and less inclined to control their children, or less and less able to do so effectively. So that where there is truancy, you have a number of older boys seizing upon younger boys and beating them when they feel like, and other things happening. And if disciplinary measures are taken against the offenders, their parents get annoyed and go to the school and make complaint and so on. So I'm appealing to parents to open your bright eyes on your children and try to rein them in so that there will be fewer cases of bullying occurring in the schools. Now, just remains for me to remind you, and I'm speaking now to members of my Spiritual Baptist fraternity, that on Sunday the 17th of March, commencing at 12, there will be an enthronement service at Belmont Spiritual Baptist Cathedral for our new Archbishop, His Eminence Melford Pompey. An invitation is extended to non-Baptists, and we expect that Baptists especially those from the Archdiocese, will come there at Belmont on Sunday to participate in that very significant ceremony where we enthrone our new Archbishop. There'll be delegations coming from overseas, and we expect the service will finish no later than about 5:30. All right, well, that's it for these lengthy preliminaries. But I made the topic, the substantive topic, one that could be dealt with shortly, but an important one, and one I've spoken about several times, but it is timely for me to repeat something about sentencing. Sentencing is that part of a criminal trial when a person, having been found guilty of the offense with which he or she is charged, is punished by the court as a result of that finding of guilt. Or indeed, if the person has pleaded guilty. You will often hear commentary and see things published in the newspaper criticizing a court for an apparent discrepancy in the levels of punishment given to different persons for the same or similar offense. These comments are normally made by persons who have been nowhere near the courthouse during the time of sentencing, or indeed at any time during the trial, and who simply hear so-and-so has been sentenced to a suspended sentence, or so-and-so has been sentenced to a fine of this or that magnitude, or so-and-so has been sentenced to a term of imprisonment of X number of years. And they will say, well, how come that person only gets so-and-so while, and they will call another name, had got a much harsher or more lenient sentence for the same offense? Well, that is because judges don't impose a sentence. And when I say judges, please understand me to also mean magistrates or the president of the family court. They don't impose sentences based on saying "ini, mini, mini, mo." Nor do they pull a sentence from a hat or a bag. Nor do they simply close their eyes and impose a sentence by guess. There are sentencing policies which the judge or magistrate has to follow. One principle which has taken hold in many countries is that of the reduction of the severity of the sentence in cases where the person has pleaded guilty. Because when a person pleads guilty, it means the court hasn't got to go through a trial, or the court hasn't got to continue a trial which has already started. And there's almost a universal principle that if somebody pleads guilty to an offense at the first occasion on which he was called upon to make an answer to the charge, that guilty plea on the first occasion usually merits a 1/3 reduction in the maximum sentence prescribed for that offense. Therefore, if someone commits an offense which carries a maximum of 6 years, and the person pleads guilty at the first occasion, automatically the person gets off 2 years, being a third of the 6-year maximum sentence prescribed by law as punishment for that offense. So that in sentencing, the judge has to take into account a lot of factors. The nature of the offense, the effect on the victim, the history of the convicted person. In other words, is this a habitual criminal or is it a first-time offense? And there's another rule of thumb that first-time offenders are seldom sent to prison, unless it's a very serious offense for which the judge finds that there's no other penalty that would serve the case. The judge has to look at aggravating factors, that is, factors which made the offense a terrible one, and mitigating factors, factors which makes it necessary to extend mercy or leniency to the person about to be sentenced. So that if you hear that a suspended sentence has been handed down to somebody, it means that the judge or magistrate must have had good reasons for not sending the person to prison immediately, but to hang the threat of the suspended sentence over the person's head. And the way a suspended sentence works is that if a person is sentenced to 9 months and it is suspended, the judge will normally indicate for how long it's suspended. Usually, sentence is suspended for a year. It means that if the person offends again during that year, is brought to court and is found or pleaded guilty, then that suspended sentence can be invoked upon him in addition to the punishment laid down for the new offense that he has committed. So the suspended sentence means, look, you have to behave yourself for X number of months or years. Otherwise, you will go to prison for the original offense for which you've been convicted and face additional punishment for the fresh offense that has brought you before the court on a fresh occasion. In closing, therefore, let me say that when sentencing takes place, the functionary, the judge or magistrate who applies the sentence, does so in a considered, thoughtful manner, having regard to precedent, to the nature of the crime, the prevalence of the crime, the effect of the crime on society, and other factors, and tries to devise a length of punishment or nature of punishment that befits the offender, that specific offender. I am urging you, therefore, when you hear that anybody has been sentenced, just tell yourself, look, the judge knew what he or she was doing, or the magistrate knew what he or she was doing. And don't automatically assume that the magistrate got it wrong and person was sentenced too lightly or too heavily, as the case may be. These are magistrates and judges sit there week after week hearing these cases, and they know what they are doing. Please have confidence in them. Don't think you know better, because not even the lawyers who are involved in the case would have the appreciation that the judge has of where that offense fits. The lawyer would be dealing with 1, 2, 3 cases a week. The judge or magistrates deals with cases every single day that they sit. So that lawyer would only have to come into court for his clients. But the judge or magistrate hears cases involving all the clients of all the lawyers. And even the lawyers, therefore, would not really appreciate what has gone on in terms of sentencing of other people who would have been found guilty of the same offense that his client. Therefore, I sum up by saying, continue to support the judiciary. They are trying their best. They're doing a stressful job, because it isn't easy to sit there day after day and get evidence of the negative side of human character, the evil and wicked side of human beings. The judge has to sit there and absorb that and try to get that out of his or her mind so that he could sleep peacefully. Okay? All right, so that is all from this program of the Law, new program number 929. I look forward to being of further service to you next week, Monday, DV, for another presentation in this public service nation-building series, The Law and You. Do have a pleasant week, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, and may the good Lord continue to bless us all.
The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC, and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.